Today, we're going to be talking about three particular practices for integrity. And these three are, I would argue, the most important. And if you learn and practice anything from this class, I would focus on the things for today. They are really helpful in building integrity and honestly in building a lot of the other virtues we're going to talk about. You should see a lot of connections as we go. Now, the focus of two of these practices is basically, what do you do when your heart, your mind, your words, and your actions are not aligned? And how can you make them aligned, especially in terms of conflict when other people are doing things that are wrong, and then in conflict when you have done something that is wrong? And how can you heal that? How can you build your integrity and rebuild the relationship well? And so that's what we're going to look at today. So the first one is conflict resolution from the Gospel of Matthew. And this gospel provides a very simple, straightforward way for people to deal with conflict, and it's really important. I'm going to read the gospel passage real quick for you. If your brother or sister sins, go and point out their fault, just between the two of you. If they listen to you, you have won them over. But if they will not listen, take one or two others along, so that every matter may be established by the testimony of 2 or 3 witnesses. If they still refuse to listen, tell it to the church. And if they refuse to listen even to the church, treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. Okay, so I'm going to break it down into more modern terminology. There's a few words there that are used that can be a little bit confusing. So the first part is actually pretty straightforward, that you go privately to that person one-on-one to talk it over. And this is if somebody else has done something wrong, you go to them. You don't, and one of the important things is you should do all these in order. It is often easier to do them in reverse order. They'd be like, okay, that person did something wrong to me. They're outside of my community. I'm done with them. And then you talk about them behind their back in front of the community, and you probably never get to these two. Or maybe like if things get so bad, you end up being forced to do this. And even though going the opposite way might be the easiest for our elephants, because people don't like conflict, if you go do this first part, one of the things that's valuable about that is if it's in private, you're not using kind of like community shame as a tool here. And so you're more likely to like be unified and be honest in heart and mind. And you also make it easier for the other person too, and to make it easier to rebuild. And so the second step is before that, one important thing is that the term brother or sister is adelphos in Greek, and it refers to another disciple of Jesus. And so, in other words, this person is part of the same community. And so this is important to remember, because this process is more possible the more of a relationship you have with the person. And so this is really important to remember, that building solid relationships with people make it easier to have effective conflict with them. And that effective conflict is part of deepening and healing and building relationships. And so if you do this first part in desire of trust and relationship, you honestly almost never get to the next 3 steps. But the next step is, so if they won't listen there, bring 1 or 2 others from your community that you both trust in order to talk things over, to try to rebuild things. It's like, okay, well, if you won't listen to me, like, let's talk with a few other people. And this is really crucial. Most people don't get to this. And then sometimes if you don't feel like you can do this one, sometimes you might go to this one first, especially if there's a power dynamic, or if this person is not in your community, but there is someone who is in the community together with you. So for instance, actually, one of my friends said some things on Facebook recently that another one of my friends was really offended by, and thought, not only offended, but he thought it was wrong for him to say these things. But he doesn't know him, but knows that I know him, and asked if I could arrange a meeting, a venue, some seating, and that we could talk it out. And that's what we're going to do in a few weeks, only weeks, because his wife is having a baby soon, so it's going to be complicated. But like, this is something that I actually try to do, and that some people in my community really try to do, and this is great. Now, if they don't respond to this, then you bring the issue before the community, and the community could be whatever the community is. So the school, the church, the government, whatever. But it's important. So the word that's used there in most Bibles is church, but the word church means community, and it's important to see it in that light. And so many people will go right to the community first. So if you're posting something about what someone said on social media first, you have gone to the community, because social media is a vehicle of the community. Now, if none of this works, and this is really important, then you treat them as someone outside their community. Now, the words that Jesus uses is treat them as you would a pagan or a tax collector. And that can seem really negative, but one thing to note is that if you look at the Gospels, that Jesus showed great love and compassion for tax collectors and pagans. He would eat with them, he would talk with them, he would share life with them, he would serve them. But the important thing here is that people inside a community strive to the identity of that community. So for instance, if I'm a Christian, I'm striving to be like Christ. I'm striving to be a follower of Jesus. If you're not a Christian, I don't expect you to be trying to do that, because you're not in that community. And it's not that that people inside the community are better than people outside the community, that we should believe that everyone has equal dignity before God, but it's more about like, what are you working towards? What are you striving towards? And similarly, like, you don't rely on people outside your community in the same way that you rely on those inside your community. And you could see community here as church, or as family, or, other communities that you might have. And similarly, you don't expect people outside your community to live up to the ideals of your community. And so this is important. So treating someone outside your community is not about not loving someone or not spending any time with them. It's about kind of expectations of what we're working for. If you won't kind of like acknowledge that you've done something wrong, like especially if it's serious, then and like, we go through this whole process, like, maybe you're not part of this community and this is honestly intended to be not forever. That's something to remember. Now, you might be wondering, why do I have this image of the old LaSalle gym here? And the reason I have this is that there's a really solid example. So I had just taught this in class a few years ago, and then we had the LaSalle Educator of the Year assembly, and you might know how they have the projector out there. It always has like its technological issues, and they're showing the video, and I think Mr. Devine was like, "Oh, get everyone so that way they can be in front of the projector so they can see." And so I start telling people to move. They're moving, and one student will not move. And he's in my class, and I was like, "Come on, like, just move." And he's like, "No, I'm good." And I was like, "Are you serious? Like, come on, like, you can't even see." He's like, No, I'm good." And I was like, "Please move." This is and I was like, "This is not a big deal. Like, just move over. It's fine." And he was like, "No." And I was like, "Wow, like, this is a weird hill to die on." But I was like, I can't give in. At the same time, I'm not going to make this a bigger deal than it has to be. So I just like, so there I was just like, keep going. Like, and we honestly like kind of like were in confrontation during the entire assembly. It was so weird. And then I was gonna go talk to him after the assembly, but he did that kind of like mad rush into the crowd as they were dismissed, and I wasn't able to talk to him. And I was like, ah, well, that sucks. And I was hoping to talk to him soon. And luckily, after school that day, he came and talked to me. He was like, I really respect you as a teacher, and I really like what you're saying. And I realized like I had an opportunity to do this. And I was like, yeah, I was feeling the same way that if we weren't able to have this one-on-one conversation, then like we could go from being like a pretty solid teacher student relationship to like you never wanting to talk to me, like always averting your eyes, maybe being like oh, like Mr. Kendrick, he's so horrible, blah blah blah. And instead, because he did that, we have a great relationship. And he ended up a year later asking me to write his recommendation for college, and I did so very gladly because he showed great character through through conflict, and it was excellent. Okay, the next thing is emotionally healthy prayer. Now, emotionally healthy prayer is a way, because we talked about how emotions are a big driver of what your elephant is going to do. And there's one thing that's really cool is that if you name your emotions, if you name what you want, it starts to lack a little bit of power. It kind of detaches the elephant from its goal a little bit and maybe gives the conscious rider a little bit more authority. And so this type of prayer comes from Jesus' prayer in the Garden of the Gethsemane. I'll just read it for you real quickly. They went to a place called Gethsemane, and this is before Jesus is about to be arrested and killed. And Jesus said to his disciples, "Sit here while I pray." He took Peter, James, and John along with him, and he began to be deeply distressed and troubled. "My soul is overwhelmed with sorrow to the point of death," he said to them. "Stay here and keep watch." Going a little farther, he fell to the ground and prayed that if possible, the hour might pass from him. "Abba, Father," he said, "everything is possible for you. Take this cup from me, yet not what I will, but what you will." So many of you have probably heard this before or have studied it before, but I'm going to break it down in terms of, like how we could use it for prayer. And so one of the things that's really crucial is we often, when we pray for school, we often make our prayers like pretty polished and formal and positive. And one of the things that's really crucial is that if you're talking to God, that you should also have integrity there. That it's not that you pretend to be this perfect self, or that you pretend to have these perfect emotions that never go against anything. That no, like you should be able to be real with God if you can be real with anyone. And so the first step is to bring your honest feeling or your emotion to God, whatever it is. Like, and it can be positive. It can be like, man, like I'm really pumped for this game, for this meal, for hanging out with this person. Or it could be like bored, like, oh man, like why are we still talking about this? Or it could be anger, hate, it could be apathy, whatever you're feeling. You just bring that to God. Be like, God, I am really angry right now. And that's all you do for that first step. The second step is you just think about like, what do you want to do right now? And so yeah, you bring your immediate desire to God. So like you're like, like God, I honestly feel like just going to sleep right now. It's really early in the morning, and I feel like just going to bed. And you just bring that to God, whatever it is. It could be positive, it could be negative. Like someone says something and you pray this prayer, like let's say they said something really hurtful to you, be like, God, I really want to punch this person. Like that is fine. Oops. In this part, like the most important thing is that it be honest. It doesn't have to be perfect. That honesty, that integrity here is the key. And then what you do is you just take a few deep breaths, you give a little bit of space from your immediate desire and your immediate feeling, and be like, okay, so why do I feel this way? And why do I want what I do? Ooh, that's said a little weird. So why do I want that? And one of the nice things is that by taking this space, you rob a little bit of power from your honest feeling and immediate desire. And remember, we talked about how feelings should be acknowledged, but they shouldn't necessarily lead. Because they come and go. And here, honestly, you can do the first few parts even if you're not a Christian. Maybe the inviting the Holy Spirit thing might be a little bit out of your wheelhouse, but yeah, the next step would be to, okay, like this is what I want, this is what I desire, this is what I feel. Like, okay, God, I want to bring you into this space, and like what is important here? Like, what do I truly want? What do I truly desire? So if someone said something really offensive to me, I could think like, oh man, like God, like you love this person as much as me, but you also love the people that are impacted by what this person said. Like, how can I so maybe like what I truly want is like reconciliation, or what I truly want is in line with my desire. Sometimes that's the case, but you think like, what do I want most? And bring that before God. Like, you know what, God, like I really, at the end of the day, want this. And so the cool thing about this prayer is you can do it at any time. I think it's especially effective and helpful when you're feeling like neutral or negative emotions, because it can drive you deeper and kind of give more power to the rider rather than the elephant. This is a really cool prayer. Definitely recommend. Okay, so the next thing is to look at what if you have done something wrong, or what if someone else has done something wrong to you, and like what should you do with that? So we talked a little bit about conflict, but sometimes that's not possible, because maybe sometimes the other person won't meet with you, or sometimes the other person can't meet with you, because maybe you don't actually know who they are, and you only saw them once. These might be the case. And so we're going to talk about reconciliation. And the first part we're going to talk about is non-sacramental reconciliation. And this means like outside of the context of going to a priest and receiving formal absolution. And everybody should practice non-sacramental reconciliation. And that if you practice sacramental reconciliation, you should do so while also practicing non-sacramental reconciliation. So the first thing is that like if someone's harmed you, like the goal of forgiveness is a key part of Christian morality. That eventually you should come to a place where you release the other person from the moral debt they owe you. And one important thing about this is it only takes one person. That the other person doesn't need to acknowledge that what they've done is wrong. They don't need to actually do anything or meet with you in order for you to do this. And honestly, if we don't, like, one thing that's important is that forgiveness is a step beyond justice, because collecting the moral debt from people would be the call of justice. And forgiveness is the call that Christians are called to as followers of Jesus. And one important thing to recognize, that in addition to being part of what Christians should do, also, like if you're holding on to this moral debt, one of the things that tends to be true about people is that people who are wronged tend to remember way longer than people who wronged people. And so as time goes on, if someone else has hurt you and you haven't forgiven them, you eventually end up being hurt more from this moral debt than they do. And so forgiveness can actually be a way of heal, like allowing you to heal as well. Now, on the other side, there's penance. And this is also important. Some people really don't like penance. They're like, why do people do penance? That seems weird. Like, isn't forgiveness free? And yes, forgiveness is free. Like no one has to do anything in order to receive forgiveness. But on the other side, that if someone's forgiven me and I stole $40 from them and I still have that, you could argue that this relationship has not been healed, and that if I have that $40, I should give it back, and this would be an act of self-sacrifice, and maybe I should give even more back, a la Zacchaeus, the tax collector. That I should do an act of self-sacrifice to make things right after wounding someone else. And that's one important thing, that forgiveness doesn't entail renewing a relationship. If someone has hurt you really horribly, you don't need to then become best friends with that person again just because you've forgiven them. That sometimes, like, not renewing that friendship or that relationship is good and reasonable as part of forgiveness. But someone who has done something wrong can and should do some act of self-sacrifice to make things right after wounding someone else. So if you're doing the wrong, this is what you should do. And if you have been wronged, this is kind of the call. And this is important, that the penance person should not call on the other person to forgive. They can ask for it, but they can't be like, well, what you really need to do is forgive me, because like forgiveness should be non-conditional. No. And this is important to recognize kind of where you're at. And this is important as well, that reconciliation is the two parties working together through forgiveness and penance to restore the relationship. That this is really crucial to understanding and rebuilding the relationship. That these two you can do on your own, depending on who you are, but in order to really reconcile, you do need both. And this practice of reconciliation through forgiveness and penance is crucial to building long-term relationships, especially a lifelong relationship like a marriage. And one important thing here too is that I've never mentioned forgetting. That's not really, we often hear like forgive and forget, but as I look at the biblical witness about what forgiveness is, that it doesn't entail forgetting. For instance, in the parable of the guy who forgives the debt, he forgives this one of his servants this huge debt that's impossible to pay back, and then the servant goes to someone else and beats them up to collect their small debt to them. And then when the person comes back, the ruler remembers that he forgave the debt of the other person, and that's what makes what he did to the lower guy even worse. I know that's weird without something to see, but basically, you don't need to forget. That you don't need to be naive, like, oh, this person has hurt me all the time, but I forgive them, and I'm going to pretend like they haven't done that anymore. No, that's not necessary. That's kind of taking you out of integrity. Okay. Last thing. So let's talk about sacramental reconciliation. Remember, it should go hand in hand with non-sacramental reconciliation. So for instance, if you've harmed someone and you know who they are and you can talk to them, don't just go to a priest and pretend that that's the best way to heal everything. You should go to that person first and then come to reconciliation. In fact, when I think about the sign of peace from the Mass, that's coming from a part of the scripture where it says, like, if you have a problem with your brother or sister before you come to the altar, go deal with that first and make peace. That's what the sign of peace is about, is like, have you made peace with people before you come here? This worship is on a condition that we've made peace in our community. And this is really important. So we should do non-sacramental reconciliation and then go into sacramental reconciliation for things that you can't deal with as directly, and including the things that we've done directly to people. And so there's 3 parts that are necessary in order to receive absolution. And this is, if you go to reconciliation, this is what a priest is looking for in what you bring up. So contrition. Do you know that what you did was wrong? Do you feel remorse? Do you feel sad? Do you feel regret for doing it? And do you want to not do it again? If you did something wrong, these would be the 3 natural things to do. Like, oh, I know that was wrong. I feel bad about it, and I don't want to do it again. And then you say it, be like, I did this. And that's really powerful, honestly, on a human rider elephant thing is that thinking about something is really different from saying something aloud, and even more different from saying something aloud to another person. That there's a reason why people don't go to reconciliation very often, and it's not because it's boring or they don't see how it like interacts with their daily life generally. That it's more that like, oh, like that's kind of intense and intrusive and intimate. Like, and yeah, it requires some courage to say what you've done wrong to another person. And this is actually really a cool part of it because it's so difficult. And the third part, which is usually given after the absolution, is that you do a penance. And this is an act to complete the reconciliation, to really heal yourself and to heal your relationships. As I said before, reconciliation occurs with two. So you've been given absolution from God and from the human community, from the church community. And now you need to do something in order to complete that. You need to do an act of self-sacrifice to complete that. And that's what sacramental reconciliation is. And just one quick thing, if you wonder, like, why do Catholics go to reconciliation to a priest? And the reason is because the priest acts as a representative for God and for the human community. Because whenever we do something wrong, we're kind of going against the fabric of the universe that God created, and so we should go to God. And then also, like, almost all like things that we do that are wrong also impact humanity, and we can't always go to those humans directly. And so the priest acts as a representative. Now, obviously, when we can go to the humans directly, we should, and obviously you should also like ask for forgiveness in prayer, but that this is the sacrament that we know that it like does what it symbolizes. And so this is why Catholics go to reconciliation to a priest in addition to non-sacramental reconciliation.